And Bart, stop underselling yourself. Everybody is an authority on this subject more than you know, and everybody has a role to play on this topic. So our talk is called Data-Driven Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So first of all, show of hands, who has downloaded and read the Data on Kubernetes report, the 2022 report that has just been released? Okay, you did not
Good job.
pitch your report enough today, because this is a very important data set. And you have a lot of experts here who are really familiar with this data, Patrick included, a bunch of folks in the community who have been talking about this for a while. And so we wanted to bring in some of the data from the report and talk about really where it can fit in and help us out with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, for those of you that saw, many of us did this talk at the last DOK Day, and we really dove into the equity part of it, because if you're talking about D&I and you're not talking about DE&I, you're really not talking about the accountability part, the wage gap. So we drilled into that a lot. And so we probably won't do that today because we only have 15 minutes, but go back to the last DOK Day and you can check out our talk then. We really had a lot more time to get into it. And then I think we did a follow-up as well, which was like a whole DOK webinar on it. So check those resources out. But in the meantime, I think we want to start with, did everyone see Holden's talk earlier today? Is Holden still here? Oh my gosh, it was honestly probably my favorite talk of the day. Holden's talk was about Spark and Yarn and nothing to do with bias, but I love how she started her talk with a slide about bias and saying, here's my bias that's unwritten into my talk and gets written into my data because these are the biases that I have, and these are what you should know about, including the fact that she loves her dog. And it was fantastic to see all the dog pictures. But we really, I thought that was a nice tie-in to now the end of the day, where we're talking about bias that gets into data unconsciously or even sometimes consciously. So let's start with the Data on Kubernetes report. One of the things that it talked about, the second thing, pain point, I guess, the first was security, but the second pain point was the talent or lack of talent, whether it's writing operators, Kubernetes operators, or just hiring, and because you're building your own, you basically need to have, if you're a car company, all of a sudden 20,000 software engineers also, and now they all have to be Kubernetes experts, right? Who has that? So you see all of these industries trying to hire. So I would love to hear Melissa talk a little bit about that skills gap that's causing, and also the employment opportunity that's bringing us.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you haven't seen the Data on Kubernetes report, please download it. It's on our website. The stat that Lisa is talking about is, in this report this year, organizations are adopting Kubernetes, data on Kubernetes like crazy. And the number 2 challenge that they identified was a lack of qualified talent. And this gives a lot of people an opportunity to build skills around DOK, join the community, and find employment. And the pairing with that, another data point in our survey that connected was 41% of them are looking to hire or reskill in the next 3 to 6 months. So there is a huge need for data on Kubernetes skill set now and will be in the future as these things continue to grow. One of the key ways that women and other underrepresented minorities can participate in learning skills like this is community. Open source is all about people. Technology is all about people. The way you can connect with people is in communities like ours, in communities like Kubernetes. It's a way to, as Holden said earlier, she's hiring. I'm guessing a number of other people in this room are hiring. In open source, in communities, is a great way to make connection with peers and other folks globally around the world who can help advance your career. And I'm curious, with the rest of this group, we're all in different communities. What's been your experience with communities? Have you seen that be a path to career growth?
For me personally, it has been my path.
Wait, Cortney, I don't think your mic is on. Was Cortney's mic on? Could you hear her?
Oh, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, speaking up. So for me personally, community was a total path to career growth in tech. I do not come from a technical background, and I jumped into tech specifically through community, and it's been a fantastic journey so far. But especially for anyone who is not tech background oriented, it can be daunting journey. And I mean, I personally really struggled with my own insecurities about whether I'd be able to understand the people that I was talking to. And communities are a fantastic place to get past that insecurity that can arise when you don't have a computer science background, obviously. So for me, this is starting with data on Kubernetes community and moving now into a DevRel role for a startup. My personal professional growth in this industry has been spectacular thanks to community.
And we just have to do one thing, because I love how Cortney says she's not a technical person. She just completed the CKA course today and has the button and has got the certificate. Can we give her a round of applause? She did that today. Yes. Yes. All right, now that I've thoroughly embarrassed her. Okay. Also, one of the talks earlier today was talking a little bit about ML and AI, and this is a place where a lot of bias gets written into technology. It might be machine learning, but it was still created by human beings, and there's a whole bunch of ethics questions around this. So luckily, we have data scientist expert up here. So I want to ask Tiffany to talk to us a little bit about what's going on with bias in ML and AI.
Yeah, I would love to share more. And I love what Cortney said about community, because that's such a big thing for us as well in machine learning. I think there's a lot that people don't know about data science and building data product teams, especially because it's somewhat of a uncharted territory in industry. And the more that you can contribute back to the community, or at least be able to share what you're doing, the more transparent it becomes. And so you don't have all these questions about like, why is this? Well, you'll still have those questions, but you'll begin to have a more curious approach to how can you edit and make models better, because a lot of times we're building these software solutions and we deploy them with the thought that like this is going to be it, this is the solution. And in machine learning and data, in that data world, the data changes, right? And then the patterns change, and we see that a lot. And you have to be willing to, when you put something out in production, be willing to look at that again and see if there are biases and see how it impacts people, because I think that's a really big part of that AI, ML, data science lifecycle that we can bring into and borrow from, like practice-wise, from the community.
And Audra, you have done some work in this area as well and had some thoughts to share with us.
Yeah, so I'm a producer of open source data podcasts where we had Professor David Dinks. He's a computer science and philosophy professor from UC San Diego and has done extensive research in computational cognitive science. And what he touches on is starting with ethics from when people are students, right? So a lot of the issues that we're finding or that he's seeing is the people and their core values. Ethics is super basic. And he gave an example of, if you're driving to a meeting and you're going to be late, are you going to race and, not abide by the law, or are you going to be on time to your meeting? And so those inner conflicts are what we deal with daily. And the point being is that we need to bring those core values with us to work and have these ethical conversations when we have dilemmas come up. And it doesn't need to be a whiteboard. It just is being brave enough to mention it to your colleagues in a group setting.
Yeah. Another thing that is creating this skills gap is the fact that during the pandemic, a lot of women left the workforce in tech and have not come back, right? We've seen a lot of data on this for various reasons. And we used to talk about this because we all tried to build inclusive communities and where people don't only join, but stay. But now we have people leaving for completely different reasons. And that skills gap, especially with underrepresented minorities, grew because of personal situations. And so if you came from privilege and you could have, higher daycare or had, computers in your house already, or just lots and lots of reasons why there's a lot of people that struggled a lot more during the pandemic than some of us are very privileged and fortunate. And so we just heard that 41% of the companies are hiring within 3 to 6 months for this particular technology skill, and that's in a recession when a lot of companies are doing layoffs, right? Or recession, not recession, whatever we're in. But so how are we going to get with the challenges that a lot of people still have? And we were just having an interesting discussion about who is working from home, who is coming back to the office. And Kim brought up some good points about if the women are staying home because we can work from home, because the kids are back in daycare, is that causing cliques in the office? Like what networking is happening? So I would love to hear, whoever wants to jump in on that, and maybe Melissa, you want to start just talking about how we're going to bridge that skills gap.
Well, it's interesting. I've read a few different studies and listened to a lot of different research on how can you keep women and underrepresented minorities in the workforce. And there are a lot of different ways to do this. Many of them start organizationally, where can you provide things like daycare, paternity leave, maternity leave, things like this that enable people to have a work life, have work and life balance. And I think we need to, if you run an organization or are in creating these types of policies for an organization, really think about that, because this is a way you will get and retain people in your workforce. So that type of research, we need more of that in this world.
Where would you suggest people start? Like when it's coming to hiring, people will say, well, it's a pipeline problem. And there's a few of us that just refuse to let you off the hook for saying it's a pipeline problem, right? So where would you recommend that we start to solve this problem? Anyone who wants to jump in on this? I mean, is it in the schools? Are we looking in the wrong place? Are we training in the wrong place? I love the program Bart is constantly shouting out about technology skills in prisons, within incarcerated staff. So when the incarcerated people come out of prison, they can go straight into tech jobs. It's an amazing program that the DOKC has supported from the very beginning. In every single webinar that you do and every live stream, Bart makes sure that some money goes to this organization, which the Last Mile, is that what it's called? Yeah. Amazing organization. So we need more of that, right? So how do we make more of that happen?
If I may, Bart actually has this awesome idea that I'm trying to elevate at the Kubernetes Community Days program that I run with CNCF, and it's called CNCF Firsts. And so what we're trying to do is elevate voices that would normally get rejected at a KubeCon, for example. And so part of that is becoming a mentor. So perhaps the ambassador program that we have includes that. And if you just give people that skill set in their back pocket and elevate them, then the confidence is there. And then part of that is expanding your network, which goes back to the community question. And really it's all about who you know. So make your network fast if you can. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would echo what Audra and Melissa said about starting with opportunities. And I don't think that there's one like golden solution. Like the best that anyone can really do is start where they are and with what you have. And that can be something as simple as like offering to mentor someone or offering to write a blog post that can help, that's geared towards someone who's just starting out, or sharing your experiences as a data engineer or as a data scientist. I think small things like that can help inspire people to take their journey to the next step, especially when they are like overcome by a lot of challenges that like a lot of us like who are in tech now, we've kind of solved for some of those things, or we don't think about them as much because, that's kind of sort of after the fact, right? But for the folks that are just like waiting for that one opportunity or that one reason to stay in tech for another day, a big difference can just be you reaching out to them or you saying like, hey, I noticed that you're new to this, or you're just learning or just starting out, like, how can I help? Or I'm happy to be a resource. And it can be something as simple as like a LinkedIn request, and you can help sort of be a mentor or even just a leader for those people to understand that there may be a path for them.
And I would say also, I had this experience with Melissa in the Data on Kubernetes community. I was like, Melissa, I really want to stay in this industry. I'm not really sure what my skill set can do or where I can fit in. And she said, well, why don't we have a 15, 30-minute call and talk about it? Those very small things, yes, time is of the essence. Nobody has enough of it. But the 15, 30-minute call with somebody who is taking an interest and just doesn't know where to go is priceless. That call, frankly, made a huge difference for me in understanding what my skill sets were in the tech industry, not in a different one. So sometimes mentoring happens without you even realizing that you're doing it. You're just being helpful and kind, and kindness makes the world turn. So personally, I think that is something that everyone can proactively do. And one of the other things that I always think is very cool is when I come across a tool that has documentation that's definitely developer first, but not always experienced developer first, that has some sort of entry point where somebody who's just getting started can actually understand what's going to go on and walks a very beginner level through, or has a link to a YouTube video where somebody gives a very beginner tutorial. These are things that are super helpful, not just to people who are just starting out, but sometimes to people who are transitioning from development into DevOps, for example, and they're learning operations and they really don't have any experience there. So those types of actions are small but very impactful.
And I'll just make an offer if anybody wants to talk about how you can get started in DOK, please reach out to myself. And I am guessing anyone on this panel would be okay with that as well.
Absolutely. Bart has started this first speaker initiative as well and challenged everybody. Bart and I are also CNCF ambassadors and challenged all the CNCF ambassadors, most of us who run pretty large user groups, to reach out and find the first-time speakers, those folks who have never given talks before, especially from an underrepresented group. And it's not hard to do. We've both just done it multiple times in the past month. So you can do this. You have to be deliberate about it. Cortney just texted her manager and it was like, hey, we're from a pretty diverse company and I'm from a pretty diverse company. And hey, let's talk about how we did this. And I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but her manager was very sweet. And he was like, oh, I don't really want to brag about that. And I was like, it's not bragging, but if we're not deliberate about this and talking about how we do it, it's not going to happen, right? This is not, obviously, because we haven't been deliberate about it, and that's how we got in the position that we're in. So if you're not deliberate about this, and if you have something to share, then, by all means, please share it and talk amongst your friends, and let's hold everybody accountable for this. One other thing about the report that I thought was really interesting, and then Bart, I don't know if you want us to take questions or if you want to, I know we're keeping you from beverages, so I'm aware of that. But one other thing I'll say about the report, because I really do want everybody to look at the data in this report. The folks did a great job putting it together. It is accessible to you as part of DOC, Data on Kubernetes community members. But one of the things they did is tying it back to production Kubernetes workloads and the productivity and finances, quite frankly, that come out of that, the economics of it. And a lot of the early adopters are showing a lot of profitability from running these stateful workloads in Kubernetes. And it kind of made me thinking about the concept of generational wealth. You hear people talk about this. This is a real thing, especially in the United States, because, if you don't own a home or you can't have family that passes things down, if you don't get that starting point to have a head start, the gap is so hard to overcome. And so you see this, between the haves and have-nots, and a lot of it comes from generational wealth. And we have the same thing in technology. So if you think about the companies that came in early and adopted Kubernetes and started running stateful workloads on Kubernetes, you can see in this report how well they're doing now. So my point here is about lending privilege. And what we're all trying to say is, if you are one of those fortunate companies and you are profitable because of this thing you figured out how to do, help people along. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of gap filling that we need to have happen, but it has to happen deliberately. So lend that privilege, give that education, figure out how to bring someone along who's going to be who's not clearly represented today in this skills gap that we've been talking about. Any more thoughts on that? I don't know if someone can say that a little more clearly than I just kind of mumbled that out, but all the data is in the report, but I'm just giving you another way to think about some of that data.
great. Thank you for talking about it.